It's warmly welcome all of you on behalf of the Institute of Bankers of Sri Lanka. Today we commence the program Diploma in Compliance. Prior to commence the program, hope you know about the IBSL, Institute of Bankers of Sri Lanka. It's a statutory body incorporated by Act of Parliament. In 1964, we established and we are conducting our core programs are IABF and DABF. In addition, this type of diplomas and certificate programs are we are conducting. Tell about the IBSL. Our chairman and vice chairman are from the central bank. They are the chairman is the deputy governor of the central bank and vice chairman is the assistant governor of the central bank. And the governing board members are consisting of the CEOs of the most of the banks, including Bank of Ceylon, People's Bank, National Savings Bank, Sampath Bank, Ceylon Bank, like that. The other one decided which type of programs IBSL has to be conducted. As I said, IABF, DABF are our core program. In addition, we are conducting a postgraduate program, postgraduate executive diploma in bank management. In addition, this type of diploma program series we are conducting. When I come to the diploma in compliance program, this is a very popular program among the participants. This consists of 6 modules and it's delivered to you by 3 resource persons. When I tell about today's resource persons, is Mr. D. Rupasinghe, DM Rupasinghe. So was the former assistant governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. In addition, he was worked 10 years as the director of the Financial Intelligence Unit of the FIU and has the vast experience in this field. Such basic degree from BA in Economics from University of California and also MA in Economics called Colorado State University, USA. So has the vast experience in this field and also has the lecturing experience. The IBSL is the regular resource person and also CBS, Central Bank of Sri Lanka also. So is provided his services as the resource person. In addition to Mr. Rupasinghe, Mr. Banu Vijayaratna and Mr. RMP Ratnayaka is joined to deliver the sessions. Mr. Banu Vijayaratna is was the AGM HNB Finance and also Chief Compliance Officer of the Hatton National Bank. And Mr. RMP Ratnayaka also was the AGM Risk and Compliance, Cargill's Bank and ex-compliance officer, Chief Dealer of the Hatton National Bank. These 3 resource persons will deliver the program within around 8 months period and our Mr. Rupasinghe will deliver Module 1, Module 5 and Module 6. Mr. Ratnayaka will deliver Module 2 and Module 3 and 4 will be delivered by Mr. Banu Vijayaratna. When I tell about the structure of the evaluation, 30 marks allocated for the assignments and 70 marks allocated for the final examination. Final examination consisting of 2 examination papers, 35 marks allocated for each paper. 1 paper is coming from the areas. It will be delivered by the Mr. Rupasinghe. It means Module 1, 5 and 6 and the second paper will be consisting of questions from Module 2, Module 3 and Module 4. And we hope to conduct the final examination in December 2022 this year. And when I tell about the gradings, pass mark is the 51, merit is from 65 and distinction is from 81. These are the basic things I want to tell you and I hope you will join with us the future from 8:30 to 12:30 on every Sundays and take this opportunity to thank you selecting this program for your career development. While thanking Mr. Rupasinghe to accepting our invitation and come today, I would like to invite Sir to commence the session now. Thank you.
Morning. Hi. Can you hear me, my dear? Hello. Hello.
Yes, we can hear
Yes, sir,
you.
we can hear you.
Okay, right. Right. I'm a Rupa Singer. So I'm conducting the module 1. I believe that you have listened to that. So a few modules of out of these diploma programs, and rest of the modules were conducted by Mr. Ratnaik and Mr. Banu. Those who have worked with me for a long, been the compliance official since 2006 in the various leading banks. So we have conducted this diploma course almost for 5 years right now in IBSL. In addition to that, these type of similar program, but not really diploma programs, but we have conducted series of lectures and awareness program for bankers and the official of the finance companies, stock brokers, and very recently cooperative or otherwise rural bankers. In addition to that, our scopes has been expanded to non-financial institutions as well, because especially these compliance subjects are in-depth analysis by the financial intelligence unit. Once it is established, compliance seems to be a compulsory section department of the each and every financial institutions. That's what you are required to have a thorough knowledge about the compliance. Thorough knowledge about the compliance. In case of financial intelligence unit, because my vast experience are right gathered from this field, we know that when establishing the financial intelligence related matters in 2006, there was a law to appoint the compliance official from the each and every financial institution to undertake the level of compliance of particular financial institution. That's become a compulsory requirement for all financial institutions, that include the commercial bank and other financial institutions. So dedicated compliance officer only for the compliance subject. He cannot undertake other subjects. He cannot undertake the business related any matters. So that's what we impose the condition that there should be a compliance officer, autonomous and dedicated to these compliance subject. Right? So that's what the rules and regulation and law particular to this aspect. So before I begin in the lectures today, I thought to have a fair discussion of you all to get your feedback about your knowledge about the compliance. Knowledge about the compliance, right? Perhaps you might be the newcomer to the compliance subject. Sometimes you may have more experience about the compliance subject, and might be most of you are working in the compliance division or compliance department of the particular bank or particular financial institutions. So today, I have a plan to conduct introductory sessions covering all the aspects of the compliance, basically, targeting the beginners and experienced students of this class. So my aim, my target is to finally, right after the finishing this diploma class, you must have a thorough knowledge about the each and every aspect of the compliance in a particular institution, whether it is a bank or finance company, broker, insurance or whatever. You must have a thorough knowledge, because you know that compliance become a #1 important subject worldwide. Perhaps if you look at the current situation in international level, you may see that, you may witness that compliance is the most important part. Why is that? Now look at the country economic situation. I'm not going to critique all those aspects, but I'm trying to focus what is happening to the country and what are the crucial point that's to be addressed by all the bankers, which include the basically financial sector. Now look at the one simple example. Downgrading of the country. How it relates to the banking business, financial business. Now see, country downgrade mean the simple example. Simple example is, once the country is downgraded, perhaps you might know that being the official of the bank, basically, you are facing difficulty of opening the LCs which related to the import and export, because international banking institutions, they may not willing and they may not trust as in the previous manner. So that's the issue, If the foreign banks or foreign financial institutions are in a position to decline in trend of our LCs, which are basically main factor of the import and export, especially export and import as well, we will in vulnerable situations about the getting back the revenue to the country, income for this import and exporter, support for the service of the economy, That's one aspect. You see, if you look at the compliance subject, that is the one of the smaller factor. But if you look at the size of the impact to the economy, is a much bigger. Size of the economy is much bigger, Being the layman of this country, general public, so village level people, they may not understand the situation, gravity of these situations. But the being bankers, and at least the people, those who are engaged in the level of compliance or compliance subject and working in the banks and financial institutions, you may have at least some sort of idea, fair idea about what will happen, future, these type of non-compliance, That's the one aspect, So by look at this second aspect, If the country is not in a situation, not in a position to, honor their obligations to outside parties. Now forget about the government scenario. Being the bankers, your prima facie duty is to, operate the bank. By operating the banking business, you are supposed to accept the deposit and pay back the particular deposit by the request of the particular customers or depositors, in the right time, If the customer come to the bank, if he or she requests whatever the money he deposits the bank, you cannot say that, I'm sorry, I don't have money to pay back. That's not your obligation, because you are obligated to pay back this money when the particular customer demand for money. But there are certain exceptions on that, There are certain exceptions on that. Now see, for example, if it is a fixed deposit, bank requires a certain time period, say 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, something like that. That's depend on the banking practice of the particular institutions. But you can't delay particular payments forever or reasonable time period, say 1 month, 2 months. That will have a bad impact in your reputations and your operations. Now say today you say that, okay, tomorrow is a Monday. If I come to your bank, if I say that, yes, I need this much of money from my account. To say that, no, I cannot give it to you, right? What is the, kind of heart feeling? What are the feeling about my money? Because I'm owner of this particular money. You are the trustee, guardian of that money. And you are making the money, right? Profit on that. That's a different matter, right? So being the guardian of my money, I have a right to request those, but you have a right to comply that request. If you are not compliant to that request, I have an obligation to get or go for a certain actions against you, right? That's the basic, basic about the compliance. So because of that situation, this compliance subject now become a most popular subject as well as a more demanding subject and most required subject by each and every country, especially by regulators, not only the local regulator and even international regulator, right? Even the foreign regulator come to these countries, they will look at what the level of compliance of these countries, right? What the level of compliance of this particular country. So what areas they have not complied. So what areas they have, you have significant deficiencies, right? So that's what the, not only the banking financial business, that is go for the entire country, entire nations, right? By looking at the vast areas of the particular country or government. Now see, look at the focus on the financial institutions. I hope that most of you are from the banking institutions. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. Anybody from other institutions, say financial institution, microfinance, rural bank or something like that? Any leasing companies, insurance companies? Anybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. Good to know that. Because the beginning of the class, I just want to have a fair idea about what sort of crowd, what sort of people are in our class. Because basically in this class, we are focusing mostly in the financial sector compliance. It does not undermine non-financial sector we are going to touch upon. Why? The financial sector compliance is most important. Most important because each and every international regulators and monitors, the first point they are focusing is the financial sector. Out of the financial sector, banking sector become a top priority. Top priority, right? If they find out banking sector is vulnerable, they are not compliant to the regulation, internal or external, right? Getting the money, getting the assistance, right? Getting the credit, conducting the international banking become hard and difficult, right? Perhaps you know that there's a lot of international embargoes in few countries. Now look at the North Korean situations, right? All the countries, right? All the countries have agreed to not to support North Korea in a, right, different ways, right? Even, right, nobody cannot undertake any banking business, money transfer business, even to food supply business to the North Korea. Because international monitors, international regulator, they have accepted North Korea is a non-compliance country in the international level. Similar to that, right? There are several countries in the Middle Eastern, right? Right? There are some certain embargo on Iran, Iraq, right? Yemen, like those countries, right? So basically these embargoes, right? Various kind of restriction will come through the banking business, because without international fund transfer, international banking, right, country cannot survive, because all the countries, all the payment system, all the money transfer systems are, right, centralized in two different places, Eastern and Western. But basically, all the people based on the Western world, system developed by the Western world. Now, for example, right, whatever the transactions we have undertaken in Sri Lankan context, in a simple language, if I'm telling you, right, whatever the payment we wanted to make for each and every countries in the world, more than 90%, even 99%, payments are routed through the US banking system. Our main domain, right, through the US. That's not the, right, specialty of the Sri Lankan payment system, but most of the countries in the worldwide, they almost depend on the US banking system and US, right, fund transfer system, right? If these Western countries take a decision, okay, we are not going to allow to money transfer for you all, then that will be a big problem, right? If they take the decision, okay, we have limited action, limited fund transfer system for you all, then we cannot do anything on that, right? But nowadays, there are some smaller countries union to, right, make a payments, right? The similar to, right, in Sri Lanka, we have one method called Asian Clearing Union. If Asian countries are get together, right, they are, right, clearing, they are clear up their financial transaction through this system. But if you look at the volume of transaction of these two scenarios, ASU become very small. ASU become very small, right? So in that sense, the impact of these type of embargo is not that much of, right, harmful to the country like ours. But remember that because of these international scenarios, so we have to comply each and every, right, level of compliance which are expected from the banking business by regulators, right? I hope you can see my blackboard. Now see, this is the situations over here, right? Situation over here. You may see the international compliance monitors, right? Then they deal with the, right, local or internal regulatory authority. authority, right? Then all the regulated institutions, right? So now see, I will mention the name of the banks, but don't take seriously because only for the class presentations, right? Now see, those are the regulated institutions. We say, okay, Bank of Ceylon, right? This is the bank. Now see, the operation of the Bank of Ceylon or the level of compliance of this particular bank are monitored by the internal regulators. That means country regulators. Right? Not only the BOC, other banks as well, other financial institutions as well. Now right? If the local internal regulator find out any kind of deficiency based on their right laws, rules, and regulations, which I come to that point later, right? They will take the action on this particular institutions. So that means these regulators' actions are not complied by the particular institution, say B or C, then legally those right institutions are empowered to take actions against this bank. Right. Now remember that. I'm just trying to explain the gravity of this compliance. Say that these internal regulators, if they have not taken proper action on these banks, those institutions, right? If the international monitors, if they find out, right, local regulator is not that much of strong enough to take action, or if they find out these local regulators are not taking actions against the non-compliance of these banks, right? They have a right or they have a power to, right, take actions against these two institutions, even the regulator, right? Even the regulator, right? Then these particular institutions, right? So those are the international scenario, right? Because of that, right? Nowadays, if you look at these 40, 30, 40, right? 1930, 1940, these compliance may not be that much of serious. But today's world, today's world, these are become very serious issues. Right. That's what I just want to explain you before we go further. Right? Compliance lectures. Okay. Right. Let me to find out the ways. Okay. Yep. Sorry, you can't find the last away. Anyway, right. Okay. Now, yes. Excuse me, give me a minute. Right. Okay. Okay, based on that, I just want to further elaborate what the compliance is. Right? Then what is the compliance? Right? So sometimes it may refer as a, right, adherent to, right? So otherwise following. Now see what is this adherent to what? Following what? There are few type of scenarios. So one can say what is the compliance might be answer is adhering to law or otherwise following the law. Right? Once you talk about the laws, there are so many laws in the country. There are so many laws in the country. Right? If you look at each and every sector, right? Each and every aspect, right? You may find the relevant law of this particular sector. But here, we are talking about the laws relating to the, right? The sectors we are going to talk on that, right? Now, see, if you look at the banking sector, right? There are a few laws applicable to banking practices and operations, right? Now, basic act is Banking Act, banking law, right? Banking Act, which regulated all the banking institution by the central bank or bank supervision department, right? Then in addition to that, in case of foreign exchange operations, there are another regulation, another law, right? Then the establishment of the bank, there's another law, Monetary Law Act. Giving the license to the banks, there's another laws, right? If they go for international transactions, there's a separate law, payment and settlement system laws, right? Likewise, right? So compliance mean, right, adhering to the, right, adhering to the laws with adhering, adhering to the laws of the particular sector, right? Adhering to the law. Then the second aspect is, right, not only the laws, then there are maybe some regulations. There are maybe some regulations, right? Regulations. Those regulations are based on the law because law is not a, right, complete document for the compliance, right? Therefore, right, regulators are empowered to, right, draft and approve the certain regulations on that. So that means the fulfill the gap of the law, right? Fulfill the, right, gap of the law. Now see, to take the simple example. Now the banks are regulated, supervised, right? Supervised by the central bank supervision department. They will come for the inspections, right? Check for how to, right? How to comply with the, right,
keeping conducting the bank in business. What are the lapses? Right? What are the deficiencies? So how to fulfill those deficiencies? Right? Other particular banks have break the rules and regulations, right? Or other type of laws. So those are the factors, right? Those regulators will check on that, right? Details I will explain you those things later on when we are moving for the other classes. Now remember that laws are, right, draft and passed by the parliament. Being the regulator, we cannot create the law. We cannot pass the law. Those have to be done by the, right, done by the policy makers of this country. But as a regulator, we can provide them our input how to draft the law. Which aspect have to be included in the law. Once it passed by the parliament, I will explain you later next classes how the laws are drafted, how it passed by the parliament, right? Once it, the law is passed by the parliament and finally signed by the speaker for the particular document, right? It's become a law of the country. Then we are bound to follow that laws. Then based on the particular laws, regulator can draft or create the regulations, right, which have to be followed by all the regulatory institutions, right? That's what the most of the time in case of bank in business, central bank supervision department, they will issue the regulations, certain regulations. In these days, you can see more common regulation about the operations, right? Then we come to the rules, right? Rules. What are the rules? Right? Rules are not that much of strict like regulation. If you are not compliant with the regulations, there will be punishment component over there. Right? Rules are there, right? They may not that much of strictly, right? Strictly follow, but those are the good for the business, right? Rules are there, right? There are some rules by the FIU. Okay, once you open the accounts, but it's covered by the regulation also, right? You must do the identification of the particular customer. That's the regulations. There are some rules to be followed. How to identify the customer? What are the documents you need to collect? What would be the identification document you have to keep? Right? Those are the things come under the rules. Right? So I will show you later on what are these rules. Then the standards. You have to follow certain standards. Standards may be, right? Standard may be not really rules, but to certain, governed by the certain rules and regulations. So that means those are the standards you have to maintain, right? Those are the standards we are expecting from you all, right? So those are the things. Now see, perhaps you might remember your school going age, right? There are some standards in the school, right? You have to come on time to the school and class. get ready for the lessons, clean your classroom, keep everything ready for the teacher, right? Those are the standards you have to, right? You have to follow, right? You have to follow. Those are the good for the business as well. Business as well, right? The next aspect is code of conduct. Code of conduct, right? Code of conduct. So how to conduct the business in ethical manner. Ethical manner. Now see, especially in the bank, in business, we have a code of conduct, right? How to conduct the business, right? Now see the practical example, right? Now see, dialogue, dealing with the customers. There are certain standards as well as the code of conduct, right? Can you explain your customer in a hard language once he come to the counter, right? In a harsh language or hard language? Can you address the particular individual? No, right? No. You have to be polite. You have to listen to the customer because customer is your major input. Sorry. He is the guy you bring the money for your business in order to conduct your business, right? So in that sense, you must respect him in a right good manner, right good manner. Otherwise he may not listen to you. Sometimes he might terminate the business with you all and move out to another place. What is this stupid bandman? What are these stupid manager like that? I have seen that. I have heard these kind of words used by the customers, right? So your behavior, your conduct is not that much of friendly. Say that your behavior is aggressive, people won't come to you. Not only the banking business, look at the home front even. If you always aggressive, right, about your sisters, brothers, your parents, and your wife, children, right, no one love you. Likewise, the staff of the particular banks is in aggressive manner, shouting to the customer, hey, go around, right, go and sit over there like that. Or are those people are willing to join with you? No. Because today world is competitive. If the customer is not willing to deal with the bank or loan, he can go to the Sampat. Right? If the particular place is not the standards, he can go to the Zilla. He has many choice. Right? Right? So, similar to that, right? Code of conduct is the particular officials. Or otherwise, in a simple language, your behavior is most important to right, grab the business, retain the customers, retain the business. Right? So those are not, perhaps you might think that those are not in a, right, those are not compliance. Yes. But if you look at the right level of compliance, all these big things and smaller things also included. Perhaps you might have thinking about, yes, compliance means the, right, compliance to all the rules and laws, rules and regulations, that's all. Other than that, nothing else. No. Right? If you look at the institution compliance mean, right, institution compliance mean, that include all these aspects. Perhaps you might have a chance. I believe that most of you will have a, right, traveling abroad. Go to the Singapore. Go to the Singaporean bank branch, right? How they respect the people, They always think that customer is our king, right? Customer is our king. Not only that, even you go to the grocery shop, they always come and trying to help you find out the material you need, right? They help you to find out what kind of qualities, what kind of product you are expecting, right? This is the, those are the friendly environment. If you go to the country like USA, there are no helpers, right? There are no, right, employees to support you. In your own, you can choose whatever the material, whatever the goods, whatever the parcel or whatever, and you are free to take it back to the cashiers, and you have a freedom. If you are not willing to take it, then you are free to drop it somewhere. I mean, there are some places for that. That's the liberty of the customers. Liberty of the customers. So that's what they always think, that wherever we go, it's a bank or supermarket or road or bus or anywhere, right? They always think that their customers are superior, right? That's the standard they are maintained. That's the code of conduct they are expecting from the employers, right? But think about the banking environment, right? Think about the supermarket environment. Think about the transport environment. Those are the aspects we are expecting the level of compliance and standards much better. Then look at the traditions, right? We have to respect our traditions, right? We have to respect the traditions. Now, in the early part, when we travel the buses, if you see the, right, old fellow like me, there are, right, we had a tradition to offer seat. If you see the pregnant ladies, we have a tradition to offer seat. If you see the clergies, we have a tradition to offer seat, right? But nowadays, right, what happened? If we saw these people, we are trying to sleep in the particular seat. Those are not the expectation if you look at the compliance, right? The traditions and practices, then internal control. Those are most important. You see, perhaps you might know that when we're in the children's, right, during that period, right, entire scenario society is much changed right now, right? Respect the people is now, right, you can't find it. And the practices, what are those practices we are talking? What are the practices we are going to talk in, right? There are certain practices, right? There are some inherent practices, right? Which are respect each and every tribe. Now see, for example, perhaps you might have seen these days in the British Parliament. I'm not going to talk about the Sri Lankan Parliament, right? The British Parliament, right? Perhaps you might have seen that there's a practices, right? Once I am talking, nobody, right, without my permission, nobody going to talk in that practice, right? They are not going to disturb you, right? Anybody is not going to disturb because they honor the practice. Practice is give the chance to number A to talk first. Then come to the second person. Once I get the chance, then my chance to talk, right? So likewise, there should be a patient manner. Number one customer, number two customer, number three customer, like that, right? But nobody will against you if you, right, treat to the tradition like that. Okay, when the old people come to the counter, right, you can come and treat the particular individual. Nobody harass you. Nobody blame you, That was our practice, but even nowadays, those are nobody cares. So those things. So I'm just taking the practices in the terms of these words. Then the internal control. You should not breach the internal control. Right? You should not breach the internal control. Because internal control is much important to, right, long-term establishment of the particular institutions, right? That's attractive for the customers as well, right? So these kind of, but if you look at the compliance, right, all those things are coming to that, factoring into that. But remember that if you look at these kind of things, perhaps you might think that you see how difficult compliance is. But we have to undertake it, we have to do it. Otherwise, we won't be, as a nation, we won't be a compliance. But if the good banking business, we won't be a compliance, right? If you are not honor all those aspects in each and every, right, each and every institutions, right? Because good compliance is a much expectation of, right, regulator, right? Oops. Okay. Now then, we'll move to, right, here in this compliance class, we are basically focusing on the financial institution, level of compliance of the financial institutions, right? Level of compliance of the financial institutions, right? But when I'm talking about the financial intelligence unit, I'm talking about the level of compliance of the non-financial institution as well. But here, right, we are talking about the, right, level of compliance of the financial institutions. Okay. Now, what is the financial institution? Yes. What is the financial institution? I want to listen to your voices. Please let me know. What is the financial? Please tell me your views on that. Anybody, any volunteers? Please, this is not a physical class. If it is a physical class, I will tell who should answer, but here I can't do it. So that's what the please, any volunteers? What it mean by the financial institution? What is financial institution? Anybody, please? Any volunteer? Yeah, please. Nobody? Right.
An institution.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello. Yeah,
I'm
an
sorry.
institution that provides financial services and network.
That's right, financial services. Okay, right. Then I'll ask another few questions from you all. What are those financial services?
Lending services and deposits.
Okay, yes, yes. If it is a bank, yes. Right. What else?
Leasing facilities.
Leasing facility, yes. Okay, okay. Right. Anybody? All right. Okay. Financial institutions. Okay, right. So here I have given the smaller definition over there. Institutions that provide financial services and advisors. Financial services and advisors. Okay, that's good. Now see, now look at the, right. Now supermarket. Take supermarket and banks. Right? So, are those supermarket provide financial services? Say, for example, we take the food city. Are they provide the financial services for you all? They are not providing any financial services, right? Because, right, they provide their service for money, right? They provide their services for money. But in case of banks, you provide, right, again service for money. Is that? Right. Okay, think about like that. Okay, this is the bank. This is the food city. Yeah? I'm taking on the example only. Yeah? Don't highlight it outside. Banks, to provide service, what is your input? Money. Right? Food city, provide their, right, service, right, for money. What is the difference? Right? Here, right, they are service provided, right? They are goods and services provide for money. Right? Your good and service is also money. Right? So you provide your input, provide for money. So that means you service, money is provided for money. So your input is money, that means right, deposits or cash is your input. Then, right, your output what is your output? Again, money. Right? You give the loans and advance, right? Those are in terms of what? Right? So because of that, those banks and finance companies, we have a special category special category called financial institutions. Financial institutions, right? They are input as well as output, right? Based, right? Or the money, right? In case of food city, the output is good and good, groceries, right? Sorry, right? So input is groceries, output is money, cash and credit. So that's what the difference between the financial institution and other institutions. So that means institutions that provide financial services and advice. Yes, if you provide the financial services, loan, advance, opening the accounts, right? Those are your financial services. Selling foreign exchange, your financial services. Opening the current account, giving the facilitation of checks, that's your financial services. Right? What is the advice you are giving? What is the advice you are giving? Right? Basically, so don't think about the broad advice, but those are the things, right? Services you are providing on fee base. You are providing some services on fee base, right? Fee base. So those are the, right, other aspect of your income. So those who are engaged in these type of aspect, right, we call as a financial institutions. The input is money. You're making the profit based on that. But if you compare other institutions, their input is not money, something else. But they are making money using that, right, input. So that's the difference between these two categories. But remember that being your input is money, right? Careful regulation of the your institution is, right, prima facie objective of the regulator and the country as well, right? Country as well. Now see, right, if the depositor deposit money in your bank, your company, sorry, your finance company, if something goes wrong, right, regulator is there to check and balance what has happened to you. And nowadays, there is a deposit insurance scheme. If something goes wrong, right, to pay back at least part of the losses. But if you look at the grocery shop, right, food city, if the particular institution are bankrupt, are there any regulators to pay back you, being the supplies to the particular institutions? I'm a vegetable supplier to food city, right? Suddenly the company is closed, right? Are there any regulator to pay back my losses? No. No. Right? That's what the, right, impact of the regulation and benefit of the regulations, right? At least, right, at least regulator have a liability, right, right, part fulfillment of the customers, financial sector customers' obligations. That's what perhaps you might have seen that finance company failures, central bank have to pay certain portion of their liabilities. That's the right? Regulators, now it's become obligations. That's what they regulate you, right? That's the difference between that one. So that means you can understand the difference between the financial institutions, right? Now, you see, in a practical scenario, you can argue, okay, banks also accept the cash, Food City also accept the cash. What is the difference between that? So those are not in a similar way, right? Those are not in a similar way. That's what I just want to get the clear idea about what the financial institution. Your input is money, Food City input is not money, right? Okay, right. Now look at what are those financial institutions in this country? Right. You're difficult of moving of those things. Let me to check that one. Right. Okay. Different type of financial institutions. This is the international scenario, right? International scenario, different type of financial institutions, retail and commercial banks, right? So retail and commercial banks. But in our country, we have commercial banks, right? But other countries, if you look at the Western countries, they have two different types of retail banking and commercial banking. In our bank branch, we handle both. Retail banking means the catering to the customer, individual customers, right? Commercial bank means catering to the big customers. That means businesses, right? But in our scenario, we do both. Smaller customers as well as the big customers. But in some banks, we have seen that you have a corporate branch to cater into the corporate clients. So that means the big clients, right? Big clients. That's how they do it. But in the big countries like US, Canada, so they have, right, these type of retail banking as well as the commercial banks. Retail banking branch is so smaller, right? Maybe limited to 2 to 3 employers, right? The commercial bank branch are, a commercial bank branch means not a commercial bank like Sri Lanka. Big branch which cater into the many, right, companies, only the corporate clients, right? Then the credit union, or otherwise they call it a credit banks, only for the credit. Their job is they accept the deposit, they provide the credit, only for that. You can have a deposit over there. Once it matures, you can withdraw that. Their prime business is, right, provide the credit for various sectors, right? That's what they call it as a credit bank, or otherwise credit union. But credit union means is similar to our, thrift societies in our country, but it's much more advanced. Thrift societies mean, you see this, what you call that, village level societies. They make a deposit, then they will borrow at the reasonable rate, right? So that's what the credit union concept is, started in the US market in a rural level. Now they vanished this rural, but still those banks are running in the particular area. They call it a credit union, right? Rapi can Atamaru bank kela.
You see the Samurdhi Bank, then our rural level village, that cooperative society banks are something like that, right? Those are things. But US market, this credit union is much bigger now. A huge institution right now, right? They provide only the credit. Then the saving banks and loan associations, right? Savings bank, they save the money, right? And use these savings to big companies to lend, right? But ours are different. We have a savings bank in a rural level. We save and lend both, right? These loan associations, they have a capital from various institutions. Based on that, right, they will provide the loans. Sometimes, like this, it's similar. Sri Lanka is similar to like village level in cooperatives, right? So like it's similar to that, but in a US market and Canada market, this loan association are much bigger institution, right? Then the investment bank, right? Investment bank, those are the banks only do the investment based on their capital. Some banks, they won't accept the deposit. They require the form of capital injection from the various individual and companies, right? They undertake only the investment activity. It might be the share market and the big companies and the new projects. Those are the aspects they are handling. Then the brokerage firms. Brokerage, what the brokerage is, right? Right? The big market, this brokerage mean agriculture brokerage, right? Industrial brokerage. In ours, it's these brokerage firms are famous for the investment purpose. Share market and the insurance market. Those people handle, this US market, developed market, they handle each and every aspect through these brokerage firms. But our country is limited to various kind of aspects. Then the insurance companies, right? But insurance companies, even though those things are called as, right, financial institutions, but in our country, right? So insurance companies, we are also treating as a financial institutions, but it's not treated as a bank, right? Those are not treated as a bank or thrift societies. They're different financial institutions. Then the mortgage bank. So yes. Oops. Right. Here, let me do that. Right. So balance part I cannot see. Mortgage banks and might be. What's the next one? I cannot see this. My presentations over there. Anyway, let's move to another slide. Right. Those are the financial institutions in Sri Lanka. Those are the famous institutions. Our money market, banking sector, right, limited to these aspects. Licensed commercial banks, so that means commercial bank that include the retail business as well, right? Retail banking business, so that means our commercial banks undertake retail and, right, both commercial activities, right? So a smaller loan, big loan, corporate loan, right, individual loans. Then the authorized money brokering companies, right? Authorized money brokering companies. So money brokers, not that much famous, but those people are working on money brokering, especially in the foreign exchange market. Then the licensed specialized bank. So they license for the special activities, for service activities, housing activities, like that. Now see, State Mortgage Bank, specialized bank, right? They specialize for the, right,
mortgage, house, what you call the housing loans. But now they are doing other business as well. The Savings Bank of Sri Lanka, right? National Savings Bank. Those two banks are specialized for savings banks. But now they are engaged in different activities, but still we call them as a specialized bank. Then the finance companies. You know the finance companies. Those are the mushrooming companies. More than 50 finance companies were some time back. Then now that has been reduced to, I believe that around 35. Now, you know, there is a merging procedure adopted by the central bank to amalgamate big companies with the smaller companies, finance companies, to reduce the systemic risk of these finance companies. Then the leasing companies. Leasing finance, some of these leasings are, right, different businesses. Some of these things are attached to the bank as well as the finance companies, right? Finance companies, but the governing regulations are different from leasing and finance companies. Then the authorized primary dealers, which undertake primary dealing business. There are some private primary dealers. There are some bank primary dealers, which especially dealing with the government securities. Then the authorized microfinance companies, but perhaps you might have seen that we don't have, if you look at the microfinance companies in this country, almost all the microfinance companies are not registered with the central bank. Central bank is a regulator, but those microfinance companies are very small. Their operations are very limited to certain area, and sometimes you can't see the operations and the right location of these microfinance business. Might be in one house, one individual, something like that, right? So I think 4 to 5 years ago, central bank advertised we have microfinance legislations act, which to be registered microfinance institution in this country. As far as I am concerned, only one institution are registered, others are not registered. But still mushrooming, right? There are a lot of issues with regard to the microfinancing because people don't want to register, and even our people, they are not support to register microfinance institution. Perhaps now it's become a biggest problem for a government as well as the central bank of monitoring those smaller microfinance companies, because those you know that it's become a political agenda now, because the microfinance companies, they lend the people. If they are not settled outstanding, they are right used to get back whatever the belongings of the particular microfinance borrowers, their belongings, right? That's the kind of bad practices, right? Those are the situation of microfinance. Even though we are talking about this regulation aspect, right? Central bank as well as other regulatory authorities, they have conducted many awareness programs about these microfinance companies and microfinance lending, but still people are moving toward that direction because it's easy to get money, right? Easy to get money. Because these microfinance people, they visit the particular house and they lend the cash. Perhaps it without any security, right? Without any security. Security might be TV, right? Dining set, right? Right? Visiting set like that, right? And the most of the, you know, that especially, I must say that ladies are tend to borrow from the microfinance companies to, right, fulfill their requirements to buy some, right, items to their home, right, kitchen items like that, right? Their rates are very high, but those people, they don't have much knowledge about the rate they are charging, right? They are sometimes they fix the rate weekly, right, fortnightly and monthly basis, 10% to, right, 10% per month. You look at the annualize, you analyze it, rate of this microfinance, interest of the microfinance loans. So that's how the microfinance system become
vulnerable system in a country like ours right now without proper regulations. Okay, right. Now we want to talk about who are the regulators, right? Right? Who are the regulator? What are the regulatory institutions? Right. Now see, if you look at the country like ours, you can find a lot of regulators in each and every aspect, even though systems are not that much of strong. Right? Okay. Now look at right? There are a lot of regulators in this country. Now see the banking sector, you can find the few regulators, not only one regulator. There are few regulators on that, especially licensed finance banks, right? Then if you look at now the practical scenarios, now see, even the electricity sector, we have a regulator, right? Public Judiciary Commissions. So you can find the regulators, but right? Basically, in our country, most of the time, you may see that only the banking sector regulators are much active on that, because banking sector become a prime sector in our country. That's what, right? So what are the regulatory institutions? What those people are doing? Why those regulatory institutions are there? Are they empowered to undertake any type of regulations? Right? Now, what are these regulatory institutions mean? Right? Nationally and internationally, it's a worldwide accepted policy that, right, important or essential sectors have to be regulated. Have to be regulated. Now, in case of financial sector, right, if you look at the historically, right, traditionally, financial sector have been regulated by many institutions, even though there is no proper regulatory mechanism. Because of that, each and every countries, and each and every, right, institution which came up with the last few centuries, they're trying to find out the regulatory mechanism for the financial sector, monetary sector, right? Because if you look at the banking sector, is much more important, because all the money of the economy are handled by this banking sector, in generally financial sector. Because of that, even, right, centuries ago, there are also repercussions about the regulation of the banking institutions, right? This regulatory aspect is so strong right after the 1930 economic depression in the world, right? Economic depression of the world. At that time, most of the banks were collapsed. Right? Once those big banks are collapsed, right, each and every government had a pressure from the people to regulate those institutions. That's the number one. The second one is those who big banks, owners of these big banks, they are trying to find the loopholes of the laws, right? They take up the huge profit and, right, put it to those institutions in the bankruptcy. Bankruptcy means, right, they are not supposed to pay back to the customer. Ultimately, whatever the assets, right, small assets which had that particular banks and institutions were auctions, and whatever the collected money was given to the depositors.
because of this experience, because of those situations, since 19th century, there was a big issue with the international market, not only the Sri Lankan market, especially in the Western countries, European and American market. There should be strong regulatory mechanism to monitor financial institutions, mainly banking institutions, right? Banking institutions. That's what the basic objective was, the right safeguard the customer and their deposits. Because of that, regulatory institutions were come up in various countries, right? Various countries, Western countries, to regulate what is the bank, how they have to accept the deposit, what are the rates they have to pay, right? Likewise, certain controls, regulations were imposed, right? Right, you know, in thereafter, a lot of central banks are come up with in the various countries to monitor commercial banking business, especially commercial banks, right? So that's how these right regulatory institutions came up in the world, because they protect the money, protect the institutions. That's the number one. Number two, banking business become a right. Banking business become a one of the core of economic development, right? Bank funding, bank deposit help to develop the economy. They are lending, right? Help to develop the economy, right? So that's what so while through the facilitating the development of the particular country, right? They wanted to, right, regulate particular institution. To what extent they have to support the economy? To what extent they have to collect the money from the people? So what are the reasonable rates to be paid for the depositors, right? How they earn the dividends from the particular banking business. Likewise, a lot of debate were started, commenced from the 19th century. Then right after that, a lot of regulatory institutions were established in the European market, especially considering the bank failure, financial crisis at that time, which we are going to discuss later. Because of that, they want to strengthen the banking regulatory framework in those countries. So ultimately, each and every country have to follow this regulatory mechanism if they wanted to join the international financial mechanism. That's what, you know, that 1950, we also established the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Before that, we have an audit, right? So all the banking business regulations were come under that particular Central Bank Scenario Central Bank Act. Later on, we have different act, Banking Act, to regulate this banking business, right? Now we have a few questions over here. What are the regulatory institutions, right? Now I have explained the, right? What are the regulatory institutions? What sort of institution can be a regulator? Then the next question is, what is the role of the regulator? What they have to do? Their job of the regulator, right? Job of regulator, what they have to do, right? Regulatory institution, what they are expecting from them. Now see, for example, as I mentioned you, Central Bank become a regulator for banking business, right? Banking business, right? Why those regulatory expertise given to the Central Bank? If you look at the each and every countries, almost all the banks come under the Central Bank regulations. But there are some countries, they have separate regulatory body. Not the Central Bank is regulating bank. There are separate regulatory authority to regulate the banking business. But if you look at the Asian countries, all the commercial bank regulations are come under the Central Bank, right? Why it's come under the Central Bank? Why we are not going for the separate institutions, right? The Asian countries, as a practice, all the Asian countries established their central bank right after the 1930 depression situation in the world. Because of that, there are a mandatory clause for the central bank to monitor all the commercial banks. That's how Central Bank of Sri Lanka also monitoring all the commercial banks. Now, right, even before, right, establish the commercial bank, they have to secure the license from the central bank. Then they have to undertake, right, regulatory mechanism from the central bank. That's why the central bank regulated all the commercial bank as well as the, right, a specialized bank. So, so what is the role of the regulator? What they're doing? What the central bank is doing as a regulator, right? Being the regulator, central bank issues the certain, right, regulations and rules to be followed by the commercial banks, right? So once those rules and regulations issued by the central bank, right, all the commercial banks are bound to follow these rules and regulations. If there is any breaches of that, regulator have a power to take action on the particular bank. Remember that, right? Regulator in power to take action on that, right? Action might be sometimes soft, might be tough, right? That's how the regulator's behavior, right? So next question is, do we really need the regulator? Right? Do we really need the regulator? Can anyone answer this question, please? Perhaps you may not agree with the regulators. Do we really need the regulator? Anybody, please? You have to talk with me, huh? Otherwise, you won't be a really compliant officials.
Yes, it's required.
Required, yes. Any justification behind that?
Because otherwise, the other financial institutions will take their own actions, and ultimately the customer or the depositor will be affected.
That's right. Exactly correct. So that means unnecessary competitiveness among the institutions, right, dealing with the customers, right? Unnecessary and uncompetitive and unethical, right, behavior of the institution to grab the customers and money, deposits, right? Because of that, right, now the objective of the regulator is to, right, fair treatment of each and every institutions. Fair treatment, right? It should be common to each and everybody. Whether it's a government bank or, right, private bank, right, regulator doesn't care on that, right? Right? Whether it's a big bank or a smaller bank, so it's not the job of a regulator, right? Consider, right? If the big bank is doing something wrong, right? They said, oh, they are big, we cannot take action. No, it's not a regulator aspect. If the smaller bank have done the mistakes, right? Violations, right? Regulator can't say that, okay, that's a smaller bank, right? We will forgive it. Those are the not aspect of regulator. The treatment by the regulator is, right, equal to each and every institutions, right? It should be fair and equal to each and every institutions, right? So that's what the really need the regulator, right? Otherwise, if there is no regulator, there will be unnecessary competitiveness and unhealthy competitiveness and unhealthy treatment for customers of the particular sector, right? Right? Competitiveness, right? treatment to the customers, right? Competitiveness, treatment to the customers, and the unfair market. Unfair market. Unfair market practice. Right. Now, okay. We have regulator. CBSL is a regulator. Now, CBSL regulatory mechanism should be a fair and equal treatment to each and everybody. That's what the same rule will be applied each and every bank, irrespective of the size of the particular bank. And the ownership of the particular bank. They don't care. This particular bank is owned by the government, owned by the private sector, owned by the wealthy people, right? Now look at being the right financial intelligence unit, FIU. Perhaps you might know that, you must be aware of that. We have to take actions, right? If there is a violation in terms of FIU rules and regulations, we impose the penalty irrespective of whether it's a government or private sector banks, right? We took the action on that, right? So because of that, right, we have to have regulators. Now remember, once you then even into these players in the market, right, they know that if there is a regulator, they may not go for the unhealthy practices of the market. Unhealthy practices of the market, right? Undercut the market, right? So what the expectation is, fair and equal treatment to each and everybody. That's the theme of the right regulator, right? If there is any partial fulfillment about the regulator, you can have a right. You can have a right forum to address it. You will have a forum to address it. That's how. Okay. Then it's the regulation the cost to the institutions. The regulation cost to the institutions. Okay. That's a simple question I'm asking. Is the regulation cost to the UA institutions? Is it cost to you? Yes. Regulation is cost to you. But why and how? How and why? How it's cost to you? Which way? So, being the regulator, we can impose, we can be not me, impose the certain limit on your operations. Right. Say cash limit, I'm telling you, cash limit, forex limit, right? Interest rate limit, right? Your margin limit, right? Then the minimum and maximum credit minimum and max, min and max credit. What will happen through these limits? What will happen through this limit? Right? Sometimes operation might be shrinking. You can't get your expected profit. Right? Sometimes you can't have a fair treatment of your customers. Right? Because is small, you have to have fair treatment for each and every customers. Right? But now you have a deviated, ne? What that came not? You have prime customers, ne? Is that fair? Being the regulator, I'm asking these questions, huh? Is it fair? Because as the regulator, we are expecting fair treatment for each and every customer, irrespective of whether it's a big or small. That's the objective of your regulator, right? But you have a prime customer, you have a prime treatment. Is that fair? I'm not trying to take any action on that, right? But basically, as by looking at the regulator angle, it's not fair, right? It's not fair because whether it's a customer small or big, it's a customer for a bank. Might be you won't get the much benefit from the particular customer, much income from the customer. So in that sense, right, you should not have this kind of concept, but anyway, you have that one right now, right? So I reserve my comments on that. Then look at the scenarios like that. Scenarios like this. Okay. You are providing some incentives for the customers. Providing incentive for the customers to grab the deposits. Grab the deposits. Right? So 100,000 plus sum. For the deposits. That's the kind of, right? This is your strategy, right? Strategy to increase deposits. By looking at the commercial angle, market angle, this might be good. You may collect more money, more deposits. Right? But if you look at the customer angle means big customers and smaller customers. Is it fair? Right? That's the question we are having. Right? Okay, anyway. Now those practices are right now undertaken by the banks. Right? Undertaken by the banks. But anyway, my question is the regulation cost to the institute? Yes, it has a cost. It has a cost. Right? Being the regulator, so you have to pay annual fee, I believe. That's the one cost. Then if the regulator impose certain restrictions, limit, right? So give me a minute. Okay. Okay, right. That's the cost. So then, now tell me the next important answer. Is the regulations benefit to the consumers, depositors, or banks? Right. Regulators, regulatory mechanism is a right benefit to you. Is it benefit? Right? Regulation is or regulatory mechanism, right? Is it benefit for you, for a bank, depositors, then customers? In these triangle, is it benefit? Is it benefit for you? Yes. Even though you have to pay some annual fee, right? Being the regulator, they have a guarantee on your operations. Right. That's what sometimes central bank make a publication says that those are the approved license back in Sri Lanka. Customers are advised to do the transaction with them. That notice give them much weight for you to undertake your business. Right? Okay, that's the one thing. In case of deposits, right? In case of deposit, yes, you can mobilize the deposit because you are under regulatory umbrella. Regulatory umbrella. You are under the regulatory umbrella. Because people, I'm not talking about the village level people, they don't have much idea about the regulatory issues. But as most of the educated youth people in this country, before they go for the institution, they look at the particular institution, they look, okay, whether it's a well-established company banks, whether it's regulated by the right regulator, what are the weaknesses of this bank? What are the benefits of going these banks? What are the facilities I'm getting from this bank? Those are the aspects now people are looking. Remember that our society is far more than 25 years ago. Right? That's what the regulatory aspect will bring you most benefit rather than the other situations. That's what the whatever the payment you made to the regulator is become a peanut for if you compare your benefit and your profit. Right? That's what the right regulatory aspects are benefit for you. Even if you go for an international banking business, right? You can't undertake any business. You can't secure any type of international loans or grant if you are not regulated by the proper regulator. Right? Credible regulator. That's what so because of that, regulatory mechanism is most beneficial for the particular institution. Now remember that even if there is a bank failure because of any crisis, right, regulator will guarantee sometime your repayments to the depositors. Right? That's what. If you see in a Sri Lankan case, we have an insurance scheme, deposit insurance scheme managed by the central bank, even the regulator. If you look at the country like US, there is a requirement by each and every commercial bank, specialized bank, credit society, thrift societies, they have to have a deposit insurance coverage from the Deposit Insurance Corporation of US. That's a must conditions, right? Because of that, people have a faith on the particular financial institution, because being the deposit of particular institution, I know that there is a regulations, particular deposit have to be insured at the Deposit Insurance Corporations. Then because that, I have a trust on the particular bank as well as the Deposit Insurance Corporation of that. Because of that, so these kind of things are beneficial for the both institution customer as well as the particular financial institutions. So those are the benefit of the regulations. Okay, almost 10. Do you need a break before I continue? Yes. Okay, shall we go for a 15-minute breaks? Are you okay? Happy? Hello. Or shall we continue? I don't mind. Nobody? All right. Okay, we'll go for a 15-minute break now, and we'll come back to finalize another lesson. Huh? So if you have any question, concern on what I have done so far, right? Please tell me after the break. All right? Can you hear me, my dear?
Yes.
Okay, sure. If we go for a 15-minute break, might be you are try to, okay, 10:30, 10:45 we'll be here. Right. Bank Supervision Department, that's the major supervisory department of the bank. So overall responsibility vested with the Bank Supervision Department about the bank. Right? So annual supervisions, investigations, whether it's off-site or on-site, that will be carried out by the Bank Supervision Department. Right? So in addition to that, there are various arms of the central bank, supervise different sections and look at the different activities of the particular banks. There's one department called Department of Supervision Non-Bank Financial Institutions. Basically, they will supervise three types of institutions. One is finance company, licensed finance companies. The second one, licensed, right, leasing companies. Third one is primary dealers. Right? If you look at the primary dealer companies or leasing companies or finance companies, those are sometimes owned by the private sector people, sometimes owned by the banking sector institutions or group of the companies. Right? There are some group, they own the banks as well as the finance company or companies, or as well as the leasing company or companies. So even though there are one conglomerate having these type of institutions within the central bank, to monitor different institutions and different category, there are different departments. The bank supervision department is the main regulator only for the banks, but the direct Department of Supervision non-bank financial institutions supervise 3 types of institutions: licensed finance companies, licensed finance companies, licensed leasing companies, and the primary dealers. Whether it's a government primary dealers, state bank primary dealers or the private sector primary dealers come under their supervisions. In addition to that, there are 3 departments within the central bank. They will monitor different aspects. I'm talking about the key monitoring institutions, certain actions. Payment and settlement department of the central bank, they will look at the payment and settlement aspect, right? Money transfer systems and related activities, how they're going to make the payment, right? New methods, introduction new methods, facilitation of payment and settlement, similar to that. Then the foreign exchange department, earlier we called it as exchange control department. They are basically deal with the foreign exchange, right? Related matters, right? How the foreign exchange remittance, right? And how the foreign exchange, right? Inflows and outflows, any policy decision related to the foreign exchange, those are handled by foreign exchange department, right? Basically now it's called as a foreign exchange facilitations department, right? Earlier we had exchange control. Control means there are restrictions on the foreign exchange, right? Inward and outward. As you own, you cannot take foreign exchange without permission from the exchange control. Perhaps you might know that in 1970s we had a permit system to import certain items. So you have to secure the license from the permit from the exchange control department to import that. Basically vehicle import, certain luxurious item imports are depend on the permit issued by the exchange control department. We don't have such a situations, right? All the restrictions were eased right after the abolition of the foreign exchange control department, Exchange Control Act. Now, in place of that, so a couple of years ago, say 5 years ago, government approved the foreign exchange department, which facilitate foreign exchange inflows and outflows. The next one is International Operation Department. That's basically monitor foreign exchange operations, right? Money transfer operation, right? Of the particular banks, commercial banks especially, sale and buying and selling of the foreign exchange by the International Operation Department. The rate will be monitored by those particular departments. So while looking at these type of aspect, country like ours, central bank become a biggest regulator. But if you look at the Western countries, these type of regulations, central bank vested with the supervision of the bank. But if you look at the UK system, right, UK system, central bank, Bank of England is not undertaking any kind of regulatory aspect. They have separate, right, supervisory authority, right? Bank supervisory authority to undertake regulation of the bank. The central bank job is only central banking. They are not undertaking supervision of commercial banks. So that has been vested with the Financial System Authority of the UK, FSA. Right? Likewise, there are different arrangements in different countries. But basically, if you look at all over the countries, especially Asian countries, bank supervision component vested with the central bank. Right. Okay. In addition to that, right, there are major regulatory institutions which come for the banking business. Right. One of most important regulatory institution is Financial Intelligence Unit of Sri Lanka. Even though FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit, housed at the central bank, it works as an independent institution within the central bank, because internationally there is a norm and accepted principle that FIU should be an independent organization having it fully autonomy of its operations, right? Because of that, that has been treated as a separate institutions. That's what it called as a Financial Intelligence Unit of Sri Lanka. When I talk about the money laundering and terrorist financing aspect, I will explain what the FIU is, what is the international scenario, right? How its locations, why it located in the central bank, reason behind that, we'll discuss it. And the powers and functions of the FIU in the lengthy manner. For the moment, remember that FIU also one of the biggest regulator each and every country, even though our FIU is located in the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Remember that at the initial stage, 2006, that was come under the Minister of Finance purview. It was established under the Minister of Finance as a separate institution in order to maintain the independence of the particular institution that has been vested with the central bank. Now it's within the central bank umbrella, right? But operate as a separate institutions. Then the next major regulatory institution is Securities and Exchange Commissions in case of banking business and some finance companies also, right? In our law, right? In our banking law right now, all the commercial banks should be a public limited companies. Public limited companies. Therefore, being the public limited companies, their shares are traded at Colombo Stock Exchange. In that sense, they have to follow SEC rules and regulations for the constitution of the board, selling of shares, issuing of debentures, like that. They have to follow SEC rules and regulation. Therefore, it's become a major regulator. Then in case of accounting and auditing, they have to come under the purview of Institute of Chartered Account, ICA. So whatever the terms and conditions with respect to the accounting and auditing, right? All those institutions are bound to follow those things. Because if you look at the commercial bank, their accounts should be audited by the chartered accountants. So these chartered accounts firms, these audit firms are bound to follow rules and regulation of the ICA. So in that sense, right, it's become a major regulatory institution of the banking business in terms of audit and accounting practices. So there's a requirement by the central bank also. All the commercial banks' accounts have to be audited and certified by the institutions authorized by the ICA. Because of that, banks are bound to follow their rules and regulations, their accounting practices and practices, their audit practices and practices. So those are the major regulatory institutions in case of a banking business. In addition to that, there are some ancillary institutions. They support banking business, but basically, not regulatory aspect lies those institutions. But you have to remember that by looking at these kind of aspects, banking businesses are regulated by various institutions. The banking business aspect of the banking businesses are looked after by various bodies, governing bodies. So that's what I just want to highlight over here. So each and every aspect, we will have a lengthy discussions later, right? So now I just want to highlight you compliance risks of the bank, right? So I explain what the compliance is, right? If you are not complied, it's become a risk, right? It's become a risk of the particular bank. If you are continuing the risks, right, that will hamper your business in majority in two ways. One is the regulators will take the actions against you. The second one, right, you have to face with the regulatory actions. You have to face with the regulatory actions, right? Because of that, now in case of banks, compliance, level of fully compliance become a must, right? Level of fully compliance become a must aspect, right? So that's what the nationally and internationally, those institutions tend to comply with regulators, rules and regulations, right? Non-compliance become a huge loss to the particular institutions, particular banks. Perhaps if you look at the last couple of years, right, compliance action taken by the each and every regulators, even domestically and internationally, especially in the banking sector, right? If you look at the major banks in the USA, UK, and European countries, as well as the Australia, almost all major banks, they were subject to various type of compliance action by the regulator. Because of that, compliance risk is, right, should consider as a serious matter. Even being the compliance official and, right, head of the compliance, you should take this as a serious subject, right? If you have done the wrong thing, if you have taken those things as a light way, that will have a huge impact on you as well as your bank. On you as well as your bank. Ultimately, who will be the victims? Your bank shareholders, your bank depositors, and your bank other customers, right? Negligence of the compliance officials, negligence of the compliance risk of the particular bank can bring a huge loss to the particular bank, particular institution, and particular clientele of the particular institutions, right? If there is a breaches of your clientele, your clients about your bank, that will have a huge impact about your profit and operations. Therefore, it is a necessary requirement, or otherwise it's become a must condition for you to comply with the compliance risks, or otherwise minimize the risks of the compliance of your institutions, right? So I have categorized four major compliance risks for your knowledge right now, right? Banu and Mr. Ratnayaka, they will discuss this compliance risk in a lengthy manner. In a future lectures, when I am going to conduct, I am also highlighting these compliance risks and how it generate, what would be the reaction on that, like that, right? So number one, right? If you are not complied to regulatory aspect, you will have a legal risk, or both sometime. Regulatory sanctions, right? If you breach any type of compliance, level compliance action, if the regulator find you have breached those things, regulator have a power to take the legal actions against the particular banks or against the particular officials or board of directors, right? That's one aspect. In addition to that, there might be the regulatory sanctions. So that means restrictions, limitations. Regulator has the power to limit your operations, right? Limit your operation, curtail your operations. And finally, they have power to impose penalty on the particular bank. Penalty on the particular banks. Not only that, if you look at, I will explain you when we are talking about the FIU operations, even sometime, right? There are some occasions, board of directors are liable to pay the penalty, right? That's the serious issues. If the board is liable to pay the penalties, mean they will take the actions against the particular compliance officials about their negligence or ignorance of the compliance of the bank, right? So therefore, the duty of the compliance team is to, honor all the steps of the compliance without any delay or otherwise timely manner, right? Now remember that if the regulator take the regulatory action on the particular bank or particular institutions, that will be a negative point for a particular bank, right? That will have impact on your grading. So grading mean, international scenario, your level of expectations will be downgraded. Right? Now see, ratings, our country has been degraded, right? So in terms of rating, our country is now in a minimal level. Likewise, based on your performance and negligence of the compliance, you will assign the grading, right? Top level to bottom level. Bottom level means you cannot undertake any type of international transaction without guarantee from other institutions, right? So that's what the right ratings become much more important, right? Given the rating, they will look at the right. They will look at all the aspect of level of compliance of the particular institutions, right? Particular institution. That's what I'm telling that this is most important aspect. Remember that. That's what the now each and every institutions given the prominence for the compliance staff, having the chief compliance officer, and giving the autonomy for the particular individual to right undertake whatever the level of compliance without hesitate. Otherwise, the next step, the bank will incur material financial losses in a two-way. One is, right, regulator will impose penalty on that. So that means, right, you will lose part of your profit. Remember that the penalty imposed by the most of the Western countries regulator hamper your operations even, right? Penalty is bigger than your profit, right? I don't like to mention the name of that, but go to the Australia and US, you may find the size of penalty imposed by the regulator, right? One example I will tell you, in case of money laundering, Australia FIU, right? Australian FIU imposed the penalty on Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Huge penalty, right? You cannot expect, if you look at the size of this penalty, it's bigger than the total profit of our banking sector. Can you imagine the size of the right penalty? Right? Why they impose such a big penalty? There are two aspects on that. One is regulator want to show others this is the penalty we are going to impose on such a violation. The second is particular institution will understand if they repeat those kind of things, the size of the penalty, they will, right, get back in the second occasion. Even if you look at the Sri Lankan FIU operations penalty structure, in a legal provisions are there to impose the penalty, right, doing double at the first occasion. For example, right, if the FIU impose the penalty 1 million the first time, if you have seen the second time they have violated these kind of, right, these kind of things, if you can double the penalty plus penalty for the second time, then you can see the size of the penalty imposement, right? So there is no appellate provision also, remember that, right? That's the law is there. Then the material financial losses mean this is, right, unbelievable penalty. Material mean that's what. It's not a smaller penalty, which is not have a huge impact on your profitability and operations, right? So material penalty have a huge impact on your profitability and operations, right? That's number two. Number three, loss of the reputation. Remember that if the regulator imposed the penalty on you all, or FIU issue the penalty on you all, there is a rules and regulation and laws on that. whatever the penalty imposed by the regulator, that have to be published through the media. Right? Especially the FIU penalties. We will make a public statement through all the newspapers in 3 languages for the knowledge of the people and regulators. That will have a huge impact on you all. Right? If it is a money laundering related things, mean when your counterparty transactions also have a huge impact on it. That's what we say it as a loss of the reputation. Right? Next aspect is risk of continuation business. Risk of the continuation of the business. That's also most important. Now, if it is blacklisted institutions, penalty imposed institutions, regulatory violation institution, if it's a branded as a regulation violatory institutions, if you go for the counterparty transactions, that will have a huge impact on that. Perhaps you may not be able to secure business unless you pay huge premium to undertake that business. Right? So those are the kind of things, those are the kind of risks associated with the non-compliance aspect. Right? Non-compliance aspect. I'm going to briefly explain you in the future lectures. You will have a chance to learn more on that. Right? So far, if you have any question, concern what I have taught and I taught you, please let me know before I go. Please, any gray areas, anything to be clarified, please let me know now. Any questions, concern on that? I don't mind if you ask this question in a single language also. Right? You are not bound to ask this question in English only. Right? Please මගෙන් අහන්න. මොකද අපි ඊළඟට පටන් ගන්න classes වලදී discuss කරන්න වෙන වෙන මාතෘකා. We will discuss the different topics. That's the one and only forum we have to discuss those things. Are you listening to me?
So I have a question. You mentioned that to avoid unnecessary competitiveness, the regulators therefore they have to impose rules and regulations. And some of the commercial banks, we see the option of priority banking. So we give some treatment to priority customers. I mean,
Yes.
like priority treatment to priority customers. Is it allowed through the regulator?
The thing is, right, there is a flexibility on that. Right? There is a flexibility on that, but being the regulator, right? Regulator, they have not having the fast and hard rule on that, right? If there is a biggest violation on that, definitely, if there is a complaint, regulator look at that. Now, see, there is a, I know that there's a prime customers of the bank, right? That is a prime customer means those who are dealing with you each and every time, right? They update about your outstanding. Right? They are treated as a prime customer. So in that sense, we are giving the kind of prime rate for them. Right? For the moment, central bank have that much of a strict on that because of the continuation of the business. Right? But what I am saying is, right? If you look at the other countries, right? So whether it is a big or smaller customer, they have to have a fair treatment for each and every customer. Now look at the customer charter which was prepared by the central bank and circulated among the commercial banks. In terms of customer charter, right, you are required to have fair treatment of each and every customer. Right? You can't violate it. That's what I just point out that being the customers of the particular bank, whether it's small or big, you have to have fair treatment of the particular customers, right? That's what the central bank have this customer chart also, right? But still, I will give the one example for you all, but I don't like to highlight the particular banks or institutions, right? Please bear with me, right? This is only for this class discussions. Remember that whatever the example, right? I trust you, whatever the example I'm going to take you to discuss, don't discuss and publish in other places. So there was a big bonanza from the one bank, right? So that means grab the deposit. They have announced this much of things over there, right? Some time back, there was one bank, right? They provide the house in a Colombo, big house or apartment or whatever the things in a Colombo, right? For the depositors, right? Central bank look at the angle of that. So ultimately central bank, right, instruct particular bank to not to have these kind of things, right? Because the people, what they have, that their purpose is to grab the deposit, right? All the people are usually people, almost all the people are willing to have a house in Colombo, right? What their announcement is, you have a fantastic house in Colombo, you have to maintain that much of deposit over here. So they grab that's the kind of deposit campaign. It seems to be unfair practice because you see one house, 1,000 of depositors, right? Right? Can you imagine what I'm telling you, right? So in that sense, it seems to be a bit of unfair for 1,000 customers, right? If you are giving the treatment here, you look at that, right? All about the fair treatment for the customers. Now you choose the 1,000 customers, but your treatment for that is 500. That's okay. I'm telling that that's okay, huh? As a regulator, I am telling that your treatment to the right 100% equal, right? What I'm telling is this prime customer concept, even though you have that one, is not admiring concept because you can't find the prime customers. All the customers come to the bank is equal. Whether it's big or small, you should treat them in an equal manner, right? But here, in our banking system, now you have a separate segment called prime customers, which are not, right, in my terms, right, it's not right fair for all. Because of being the bank official, we have to have fair treatment for each and every customers. But still we have this practice, you choose the prime customers, but we don't know in what category, what base you are going to choose them. Right? Sometimes they choose as right, those who are coming daily basis, those who are depositing huge money in the bank, right? So they are well reputed customers like that. So yeah, those are the kind of scenarios. But anyway, right, if we have a fair treatment for each and everybody without any harassment to the customer, that might be the okay, right? I remember that right now, as a bankers, we have seen that during the peak time, right? During the peak time, you may see 1,000 people are in a queue to get the banking service, right? By the time, if one senior fellows or politicians comes, the manager goes and treat him well, mean it's not a ethical manner. Because he is also a customer at that point, right? Me also customer at that point. Farmer also customer at that point. That's what we call is a fair treatment for each and every. You know that as a bank point of view, whether it's a politician, so a GA or whatever, farmer, whatever, he's a customer for you, right? So that's what our expectation is, to have a fair treatment for each and everybody, irrespective of his status, right? That's what I'm saying, that Western countries, whether you are a politician, so right, rich guy or poor guy, right, they don't have a difference between those type of categories. Whoever the customer comes first, that's your obligation to treat him, right? That's the bank in practice in the Western world. That's why they have separate queue and boxes over there. But ours are, so far we don't have such a scenario because rush time. Sometimes you have closed the counters, ne? Counters parked in the lunch time, right? Okay, that's what my opinion on that. Anything to be clarified? Shall I move to next? Okay, right. Then, right. So now I just want to go for the scope of the compliance, right? Scope of the compliance, how you are planning to undertake the compliance of the UA institutions, right? Now see, you have been identified as a compliance officer of the particular institutions. These in details of this subject will be covered by the Mr. Ratnaik, I believe. I just want to give this introductory part of that. So there are 6 types of compliance scopes. That means steps over there, right? Number 1 is you have to identify what the compliance is and what are the areas to be complied with, right? Now see, you have been appointed as a compliance officer of the XYZ bank or ABC bank, right? The first step is to identify what are the areas to be complied. What are the areas to be complied? You have to give the priority for that one, right? So identification the must, which area we need to be a very compliant, right? For that, you have to have a fair knowledge about the existing laws and regulations. Existing laws mean, right, laws by the regulator, central bank or FIO, SAC or whatever, right? So we have to have a thorough identifications on that about the laws and regulation and the sections, areas where you have to comply. For example, now see KYC procedures. Where you have to begin? You have to begin at the opening of the accounts. Right after the opening account, you can't then, right, you can't, on the way, you can't do it. When the opening the account, you have to do the KYC. So that was the, right, you have to have knowledge about the where I have to start the compliance. You have to identify the section areas, right, for the compliance. So identifications. The second one is assessment. Assessment means how far it's important to the bank in terms of the rules and regulations, right? You have to think about, okay, if I give the priority for this one, I am undermining another important aspect, other areas, right? So those are the rational and logically you have to think. That's called the assessment, right? So if I'm devote the time for this area, whether it's worthwhile for the level of compliance of these institutions, right? Or otherwise, there should be another priority for me. Which sections are there? So that means you have to have a thorough knowledge about the right operation of the particular banks, right? Identifications, then assessment. Until, right, once you identified, once you have an assessment on the areas to be compliance, then you have to report to your management, right, saying that, yes, I am ready with these documents or areas. I have identified areas to be complied, or otherwise those are the priority area first to be complied. Then I made an assessment. Those are the important sections, areas to be complied. right? Otherwise, regulator, right? Aspect of the regulatory or otherwise risks of the regulation is this much. Based on that, right? Being the compliance officer, you should report it to the management. Why? You need the blessing of the management to implement, right, your procedures and practices you are in mind, being the compliance officer, right? That's what your obligations. That's the scope of the compliance, right? Then the fourth step is monitoring. Now you have identified, you did the assessment, you report to the management, get their blessing to implement it. Now you have implemented it. Now you have to monitor, look at whether it's a right or wrong, right? Your implementation, you have to check whether it's right or wrong. Otherwise, if you are not right, if you are not accurate, if you are not implement the right policies to comply, then you have to revise it, right? If you are not revising and continue as that, the regulator might find you are wrong. You are not fulfill their obligations. You are not up to that level. So in that sense, right, monitoring will help you to find out any deficiencies of that, your policies, right? Deficiencies. Okay. Once you identify the deficiencies, you can go back to first steps, right? Your identifications, right? Then correct it. Your identification, yes, there is a deficiency on that. Deficiency on that, right? What are the deficiencies you have identified now through the monitoring, right? Through monitoring. So then recorrect it and include over there. Then you have assurance to you have done the correct thing now. Then again, fourth steps, monitor it. Monitor it. Whether to check whether, right, it's really working. Really working. Okay. That's how you implement the compliance steps, right? Run and test, test and run, right? Then you will have a right acceptable, right, acceptable compliance policy in your institutions, right? That means basically what we are telling is trial and error. Remember that trial and error mean, right? You don't have to have more errors, right? If you find out errors, you must right correct it immediately. Otherwise, regulator will come and find you your deficiencies. Don't allow to do that one. That's what. So that means that's what the compliance job is so serious, because entire health of the particular institutions are depend on the compliance, right? Compliance, right? Okay, then the monitoring, yes, you monitor it, right? Then the report the monitoring results, right? You did the monitoring, report to the monitoring results to your management or your team and have a lengthy discussion on that, right? And find out the way to mitigate those risks. Find out the way to mitigate those risks. That is easy for you to, right, come up with the manageable, right, system of the particular institutions. That's how you manage in the risk, right? That's how you manage in the risk, right? Those are the steps of the compliance, step of the compliance, right? Okay. Number one is identification. What are the risks associated with the compliance, right? Then do the kind of thorough assessment about the risk. So what would be the risk? Do the assessment. Then based on your findings, go to the management, perhaps your board of directors, with your suggestions. Board suggestion, right? Otherwise, right? With board members, they don't go through your activities and operations, right? Board members are there to question you, how you arrive at these numbers, what are your justifications, how did you identify those things? So what is your assessment to remedy those things, right? Likewise, they will question you. Because of that, right, you have to have a justifiable, rational assessment about the risk mitigatory factors, right? Then go to the management. Then management will give the approval for that one, right? With the right blessing of the management, you can implement it. And now your job is, right, monitoring of the implementation, whether it is, right, gaining the expected results or right gain. Expected results or right gain, right? If it is not right gain, then go back to the original steps. So that means your identification might be wrong. Perhaps your assessment might be wrong, right? Correct that one based on the monitoring results and do it again, right? Those should be within a very short period, right? Without much damage to the institution and your process, right? So being the compliance officer, you cannot sit and listen to others. You have to watch very carefully, look at what is happening in the bank. And if you find out the wrong things that happen, definitely you must have access to those informations and operations. Take the quick action to mitigate the right loss or results of that, right? Then the reporting mechanism is you aspect. Report the monitoring results and try to manage the risk, right? Those are the aspect. Those are become a circular level. Identify, assess, report management, monitor, right? Report monitoring results and manage results. If something goes wrong, again identify, again assess, right? Go for the management, get their blessing, monitor it likewise until you are in a clear positions and acceptable level. You have to do it again and again. That's the kind of circular type of procedures and the right circular type of activities done by the compliance team. That's what I'm telling you is your obligation is not that much of, right? That much of, right? Not that much, right? Remember that your responsiveness, your responsibilities on that is very great to operation of the bank, right? Because regulators will look at the level of compliance, not others, right? You are the people who grab each and every time, right? They won't go to the board, right? They will check with you, compliance official, whether you have done the right things. And you are answerable on that. If you are not answerable, but I'm not saying that board of directors or senior management not liable, but basically, right? The identification assessment part is vested with you all. So you are the technical sound people, not others, right? That's what. Any questions on that? Any gray areas on that? Because you will be the compliance official next, huh? Okay. Now, based on that scenario, I just want to briefly tell you role of the compliance officer. Role of the compliance. Those are the very brief scenario before beginning the class, right? Okay. Remember that?
One question, sir. Excuse
Yes,
me.
sure.
Like in that scope, where is the implementation? Are we responsible for the implementation once the risk are identified, or?
Yes, that's your obligation to implementation. That's what. Okay, look at the first step, which I mentioned. Identify, assess, report to the management. Then before monitoring, you have to implement it. Right? So then reporting the management means you are getting the blessing to the implement. Then the monitoring. Right? Reporting the monitoring results, then again managing the risk.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Without implementing, you can't monitor. Right? That's how. Oh, sorry. Okay. Right. Any questions? All right. Right. Then the role of the compliance. Do you see that? This is, I'm telling you very broadly. In a class in a later, we will explain it more and more, lengthy manner. I'm just giving you the kind of very brief responsibilities, role of the compliance of the right now. Right? Here, primary responsibility is, that's a broad and primary. Right? Primary means this should be a broad one. Primary responsibility is overseeing and managing the compliance issues. Right? Job එක වෙන්න ඕන. Right? Compliance issues දිහා බලලා ඒක manage කරන්නයි ඒක කොහොමද වෙන්නේ කියන එක බලන්නයි. Right? Primary responsibility is overseeing and managing the compliance issues. If there is an issue, you have to see that and take the appropriate action to come to the level of compliance. Right? That's your primary responsibility. Right? That's the number one broad, right, role for the CO compliance officials. Number two, prime contact with the institution and regulatory authorities. You will be the prime contact, number one contact point by the regulatory authorities and other institutions. Right? You will be මොකක් හරි වැරද්දක් non compliance එකක් report නම් අපි කෙලින්ම අහන්නේ compliance officer, not juniors. Right? We will have a first discussion with the compliance. What is happening over there? What has happened over there? Why that has happened over the particular institution? What are the actions you have taken, remedial actions? What, right? Whether you have a check and balance, you have those things. That means primary contact point by the regulator is the compliance officer. Right? Key official of internal external compliance meeting, board and committees. Compliance officer become one of the key official of internal and external compliance meeting and board meeting and board committees. Because, right, if board members are not really operational people, they are there to take the decision based on the input provided by the top management of the bank, CEOs and senior level officials. If it is a compliance issues, right, board will check with the compliance officer what is happening over there. What is your level of compliance? What are the regulatory action taken by the regulators? Why is that? What are the remedies for that part? So, compliance officer will be the key official of such a discussions and a meeting. compliance officer obliged to answer that question by the senior people, again, board people, board committees. Right? That's one of these he saw her role. Ensure all development in the regulatory aspect by developing policies and procedures to eliminate or minimize regulatory breaches. Ensure that all development in the regulatory aspect, right? He or she has to be fully vigilant about any regulatory development, right? What kind of regulatory sorry, what kind of regulatory regular development? So that means action by the regulators, right? Now see, okay. So last 2 weeks ago, central banks changed the policy rates. In terms of that, there should be some adjustment in the banking practices and practices. So you have to ensure that those things are implemented in correct time and right time. If not, regulator will take the actions against you. So that means these kind of things are, right, come under the compliance official to ensure development. If there's, perhaps you might know that CAC Act was amended with the new government came into power. Thereafter, last couple of years, right, you must ensure that you are reporting to the CAC in line with the particular enactment. That's the obligation of the compliance officials as well as your legal team to ensure that such changes are incorporated in your regulatory framework, right? So thereafter, you must ensure that you are reporting to the CAC based on that new particular requirements. So that's what we say here, ensure all developments in the regulatory aspect by developing policies and procedures. Based on that, so obligation of the compliance official to develop with the new policies and procedures to eliminate or minimize regulatory breaches, right? Regulatory regulatory breaches තියෙනවා නම් කඩවීම වෙනවා නම් ඒක minimize කරන්න එහෙම නැත්නම් ඒක නැති කරන්න compliance officer should have taken right action, ensure, right, no more, right, breaches thereafter. So that means he or she had to be fully vigilant about the regulatory development each and every time, right? If it is approved or published by the regulator, you must have a right or correct procedures to eliminate the breach of your side. That's the key role of the compliance officials. Okay. Then why is the compliance division officer should be independent? We always telling that compliance division should be official of the compliance division and the chief compliance should be independence and have to have autonomy. Independent and autonomy, right? He or she should be independent individual. Independent mean, right? He or she should have environment to take decision on compliance based on the right rules and regulation and laws. Otherwise, he or she should not take the decision in favor of CEO or chairman, right? That is not the expectation of the regulator, right? If we have seen that compliance of the decisions are biased toward the chairman or managing director or CEO, right? There will be issue with regard to the compliance CEOs, not CEO, CEO, compliance officer independency. She or she cannot take the partial decision biased toward the senior management, chairman or managing director or CEOs. He or she should have independent decisions about the level of compliance. That's what we are expecting, right? Compliance officer should be independent. That's what in FIU law, there's a specific provision that, right, he or she should be independent, and even compliance officer have a power to, under the money laundering enactment, right? If there is a right money laundering or terrorist financing related activities are right supported to take in by the CEOs, he or she has the power to report it to the FIU Financial Intelligence Unit. If the FIU have taken the decision against your CEO, right, the chief executive, right, senior management cannot take any action relating to the particular individual, your compliance officer. Otherwise, if the CEO can take the action relating to that, so that means particular compliance officer cannot work as an independent officer, right? He or she will be a bias because she knows that she will lose her job. That shouldn't be there. That's what the independency, to maintain the independency, right? The law is there. Law is there to protect her independency, right? That's what the to effect the implementation of the compliance policies, it should have an appropriate level of independence. She should have independence. That's what the FIV take the right compliance official appointment by certifying the CEO and board approved, right? The officer should be approved by the name of the compliance officer, name should be approved by the board, and CEO have to certify it to the direct FIU saying that our compliance officer related to AML safety is this, right? So their delegations, their approvals become mandatory for appointing the compliance officer for the FIU, because law required such appointment, and then we treated he or she as an independent compliance officer and having autonomous power to report each and every suspicious activities which are happening through the banking business. Even, right, CEOs is doing some kind of malpractices related to the AML CFT, that also have to be reported by the compliance officer. Compliance should not be able to, CEOs should not be able to take any action on that. That's how we maintain the independence of the particular officials through the legal status. Okay. The autonomy from the business too also important. Autonomy, decision, power to take the decision on the compliance. Have to have a vested in the compliance officer. Right? There should be right environment to avoid undue influence that create conflict of interest. Right? Conflict of interest. Right. So, being the compliance officer, he or she cannot work in other divisions. Why? Then there will be, right, conflict of interest. Compliance officer cannot be a secretary of the chairman or right secretary of the CEO. Right? That will create the conflict of interest. Because being the secretary of the CEO, right, he or she should undertake, right, direction given by the CEO. He or she cannot work as a compliance officer because we say that compliance officer should be independent, right, independent autonomy individual. So, right, both position cannot be run one officials. He or she cannot work as a compliance officer and the secretary to the CEO. That's the one scenario that creates the conflict of interest. There's another occasion also, right? Okay, compliance officer, right, has been appointed as the chief of the new product designing. AGMOD, new product design, right? That's again create the conflict of interest. So, right, new product, introduction of the new product is one aspect. Compliance is another aspect. One can develop the new product, then later on, he or she can check with the compliance of it whether it is in line with the regulatory requirements. But both activities cannot be run by the same individual. That will create the conflict of interest, because sometimes compliance officer cannot understand, right, designing of the new product. It should be a marketing product, right? He may not look at the right compliance risk of that, but that should be handled by the two different individuals, right? That's how each and every time there should be environment to avoid undue influence, right? Influence that create the conflict of interest. That's must, right? Those are the two examples I just want to show you, right? Right? To maintain the independence of the role of the compliance officials, right? Right, compliance environment. That's what, as explained earlier, right? Compliance environment means the environment for the compliance officer and the compliance team. Those are the main features, right? Compliance officer should carry only compliance functions, as I mentioned earlier. Those are the must condition for each and every compliance officials, right? Compliance officer should carry only compliance functions. He or she cannot undertake any other jobs. If so, he or she cannot undertake impartial compliance job, right? No other responsibility to be assigned. Board those ESO, managing director, who are the senior officials, should not assign other responsibilities to the compliance officer. If so, he or she cannot work as an independent and autonomy officer. The next step is should avoid, not should, must avoid conflict of interest. සිංහලෙන් කියන ලබ්ධියාවන් අතර තියෙන සම්බන්ධතාවය කියලා. Right? Must avoid. That's the must conditions, not should. They have to do it. Right? How to do it? Conflict of interest must avoid. Shouldn't be there. Right? Shouldn't be there. There shouldn't be a conflict of interest. Work of the compliance officials. Right? So independent authority to obtain relevant records and informations. He or she should have independent authority to obtain relevant records and informations. Right? Independent authority to obtain relevant records and informations. Being the compliance officer, I should have my own authority to direct sections or divisions or official to provide me relevant information and details with regard to the non-compliance. right? Otherwise, if I'm go through the CEO's office or chairman office, that will hamper my independence, my autonomy, right? So that means I don't have been the compliance officer. I don't have independent authority to, in that sense, obtain the relevant record and informations, right? There should be environment created by the management to the compliance officer to obtain the relevant informations and records and independent manner, right? Then remember that being the compliance officer, he or she not obtain non-relevant informations which are carrying out her duties, right? නැත්තම් කියනවා මම කම්ප්ලයින්ස් මට ඕන දෙයක් දෙන්න කියලා කියන්න පුළුවන් නේ, right? He or she should have a discipline to obtain only the relevant record and informations relevant to her compliance. Otherwise, he cannot be a right dictate of asking the information from each and every time. She cannot dictate to provide all the information and record, right? It should be in line with her authority and her requirement, right? That's what there is also a limit over there, right? Independent authority to obtain relevant records and informations. Then he or she should be senior enough to handle relevant compliance issues. We say that compliance officer should be a very senior officer of the bank. Otherwise, there will be a practical issues doing the compliance, right? Should be an independent officer, should be a senior officer, right? Those aspects, those features have to be, right, compliance officials. Otherwise, he or she cannot undertake her job properly, right? Looking at the banking structure, compliance officer should be a senior enough to direct other official to get the informations, right? Otherwise, he or she cannot undertake that business. That's what I told you. If there is any misconduct about the CEO, he or she should be in a position to get his or her information relevant to the CEO, right? Conduct independent inquiry before giving those information to the right regulators, right? Those are the situations. So now you can imagine, right, power of the compliance officials. Okay, right? So today, this is my introductory lesson about the compliance. So we will continue the next lesson next couple of weeks. So I will complete, right, my papers first. Then Mr. Ratnaik and Banu will come and do the presentation for their component. At the final examinations, you will have 2 papers, right? 2 papers. Each and every these 2 components. You have in my case, you have 1 take-home assignment. Later on, I will be decide whether it is a in-house assignment or, right, take-home assignment. Because last year we have decided to give you the take-home assignment because of this corona environment, right? Before that, we had, right, assignment over here in a classroom assignment, which carry 30 marks, right? By looking at the future environment, we will decide whether it's a classroom assignment or take-home assignment, right? Which carry 30 marks. Then the question paper,
both question paper marking will be 100%, but weighted will be 70%. So that means question paper number 1, 30 marks from the examinations, 30 marks from the assignment, 70 marks from the examinations, right? So out of these 100, you will be getting the grade. Ultimately, amalgamation, these 2 marks, that 2 component marks of the 2 papers, you will be getting the final grade, right? As that director mentioned in the morning, right? Buddhika mentioned in the morning, your final grade will be decided based on the right marks you obtain from these 2 papers plus these 2 assignments. The assignment, you are free to remember that given the assignment mean, we will check whether you have read more articles, whether you have undertake readings, those kind of things. In my paper, basically, you have to have fair knowledge about the regulatory mechanism, right? Banking Act and the regulation issued thereon, right? That's the number 1. Number 2, you must have a fair knowledge about the operation of the FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit, and the enactment relating to that, money laundering enactment, terrorist financing enactment, and the enactment related to the FIU operation, Financial Transaction Reporting Act. Then you have to have fair knowledge about the KYC procedure. If you are not go through this KYC procedure, please go to the website of the FIU. You may type Financial Intelligence Unit in Sri Lanka. Then you can find the FIU website, right? Look at all the circulars and there various kind of notices and publications over there. You better read it, or otherwise take the copies of that one and keep the reference, right? If possible, look at the international regulatory institution like, right, Basel Committee publications that will create more and more knowledge about that. In addition to that, right, you better read the Financial Action Task Force, FATF. If you go to the website, you can see the FATF website and you can find the more news about the AML CFT. And there is another website called APG. Look at that one also. Then you can get the more and more information on that. And then there's a separate institution called Ekman Group. Right? Look at that website also. You can get the more and more information on that about the FIU operations, penalties, laws and enforcement, those kind of things, right? So by the time, if you have any question concern, you better check with me also, right? And if I am free, I can give the kind of advices, and even if you have any questions, you come up with the next session of the class. We will have a discussions on that too also, right? This is my introductory part. Next week, we'll start with the lesson number 1, right? Supervision aspect, right? So we'll try to finish these classes within 4 to 5 months, right? Then you can enjoy your life. Huh? Okay. So I hope that you will have fair knowledge about what we are going to do next couple of weeks. If any question to be raised, as I mentioned you, it's not the issue for have a discussion with me. Language is not a problem for you all. If you cannot understand whatever I have explained over here, please have a chat with me, right? And come up with your proposals or question next week. So I will ready to answer your question If you have a question now, even, I'm happy to listen to you now. මම මොනවා හරි මේ කරපු ක්ලාසස් වලින් මේ වෙනකම් මොනවා හරි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා නම් පැහැදිලි නොවන තැනක් තියෙනවා නම් කරුණාකරලා මයින් අහන්න දැන් right මොකද දැන් අපි ගිය අවුරුද්දේත් ක්ලාස් කරා මම ඔයගොල්ලෝ කවුරුවක්වත් දැකලා නැහැ ඔයගොල්ලෝ මාවත් දැකලා නැතුව ඈ but you may seen my pictures in the various places even type to Google saying that Rupa Singh at DM at least you can see my faces here you can see my faces right මගේ මූණ පේන්නේ නැහනේ. So පහුගිය අවුරුද්දේ අපි ක්ලාස් කරාට මම දැක්කේ නෑ මගේ ස්ටුඩන්ට්ස් ලා කවුද කියලා. මම දන්නෙත් නෑ. Even I don't know who are there. Right? But there are advantage and disadvantage also. Before that we had an intellectual discussion within the class. Right? We have seen the people. But this online class, even though I'm not admiring that, but we don't have any option to teach. Right? The physical presence is much easier. Have a chat with us, and you also right there to have a questions and clarify the various kind of things. Okay, anyway, so we have to face this problem. Any questions concerned up to now? If not, come up with these questions next week also. Right then, next week and onward, I will send me my handout bit earlier. Then the Menaka will circulate among you all. Get ready for this lectures in next year and onward. Okay, then thank you very much for today. That's the beginning class for today. And we will see you, right, lengthy discussion with our course content next week. Thank you very much.